Okay, ladies, so make sure that you have a ruler and a pencil. Mechanical pencil is fine for right now, but when we start shading, you're going to have to use a regular number 2 pencil. So I'm going to be drawing a picture here of Anne Hathaway because she's beautiful. And remember, the first thing that we need to do today is add our 1/2 inch border. So you should have a 9 by 12 piece of paper. I like to line the ruler up against the very edge of the paper, just to make sure that I get the right measurements, and make sure to mark off a 1/2 inch on all corners. Remember to be very, very careful. Make sure that that ruler is lined up perfectly and doesn't move while you are drawing your straight lines. Remember, you want to make sure that this border is perfectly parallel to the edge of your paper. You don't want it going a little bit diagonal in one direction. You want to make sure it's nice and straight. Just give your work a more professional look. Okay, so first thing we're going to start with is drawing the head shape. Now, remember that we usually start with just a simple oval. Obviously, we can tell that her head is not a perfect oval. There are a few different things that are going on here, but just for continuity's sake, I'm just going to start with a basic oval. Remember that you can turn the paper or turn the position that you are drawing in to get your oval to be nice and round. See how I'm kind of moving where my hand is to get it to be in the right spot so that I can have nice smooth edges. There aren't any areas that are flatter or rounder than others. It's just a nice continuous oval. So just by looking at this, comparing it with my photograph, I already see some things that I need to change about the head shape. So remember, play that little game of spot the difference. What do you notice that's different about her head or his head versus your oval? Now, one thing I will stress is that most people's heads are a lot bigger in the back than they are in the front. So notice that her jaw gets a lot more narrow as it gets lower down in relation to the top of her head. She does have very fluffy hair here, so the hair definitely adds something to the width of it. But right now I'm just trying to go for that head shape a little bit more. Obviously I'm still going to have to change it up here and there, but I'm trying to square off that jaw just a little bit, make the face a little bit less of an oval and a little bit more realistic to what I'm seeing in the photograph. Now, one thing that's important to keep in mind is that if your person has hair, the top of their head is not going to be the top of their hair. Their hair comes off of their head a little bit. It's not just glued to the top of their head. So think about where the top of your oval is versus where the top of their hair is. Like, her hair is very fluffy, so I'm actually going to just go ahead and draw on my photograph here where I think her actual scalp would be. I'm kind of comparing where things line up just to get a better feel. And looking at this already, I can tell that the lower half of my face is way too wide. So I'm going to go in here and make a few adjustments. I do want to take a look at how tall her head is, and then just take a few measurements, figuring out where the eye line is. If you're stumped on the head shape, move on a little bit. Work on the eyes, work on the eye line, the hairline, the nose line, the mouth line. If you can get your eyes in a good spot, they look like they're the right size, then you can adjust the head around it. Your head does not need to be completely finished shape-wise before you can move on. So don't let that stump you. I'm actually going to go ahead here and draw that vertical axis down the face, because I'm thinking that I'm going to work on a few other areas here, figuring out where things are placed, the nose, the mouth, and then I'm going to adjust the face accordingly. And if you're not sure about something, remember that if you have a ruler, that's a luxury. You can measure how far down things are. We know that the nose is about halfway between the eye line and the chin, so check to see if it's true. Remember, you want to adjust to the person's face. Don't try to change their face. Adjust what you're doing so that you capture their likeness. And make sure when you're drawing these horizontal lines across the face that they actually are horizontal. You don't want to accidentally go a little bit diagonal, unless their face is tilted. Her face is pretty much perfectly right side up, but you might be drawing somebody whose face has a little bit of a tilt to it, and in that case, your horizontal lines might actually need to be a little bit more diagonal. So here I'm just seeing if her mouth is actually 1/3 of the way down. Now remember, the mouth line should be where the mouth parts, not where the top lip starts, the bottom lip starts, where the mouth opens. And here I'm drawing on my photograph, which is something that you can do that will sort of act like a grid for you, so you can get just the right placement for the facial features. Remember that the nose line is at the bottom of the septum. That's that fleshy piece between your nostrils. And then the eye line is where the tear duct sits, so the inner corner and the outer corner of the eyes. Now that I've broken all of that down for myself, I'm actually going to go in here and try to fix up the face shape just a little bit more. Her cheeks are just a little bit too wide in my drawing so far, so I'm just making some small adjustments. What I will say is, try to avoid erasing the entire thing. Try to just make small little incremental changes to what you're doing, because the oval that you have in the beginning is probably just about right. It just needs some small changes made to it. So now I'm going to actually come in here and start plotting out where the eyes are. So we know that we can fit 5 eyes across our eye line. So I did a little bit of estimating here first on my line. Now I'm actually going to go onto my photograph and mark off where the eyes start. Now here's the tricky thing. Make sure that you're marking off the tear ducts. That's where the white parts of the eyes end. Don't count the eyelashes or the eyeshadow in with this part. Just where the whites of the eyes stop. That's that outer corner. That's where you need to mark off. Don't worry about the makeup or anything just yet. So here I'm measuring how wide her eyes are. Once you've got this measurement, the measurement of the eye, you can use the eye to help you measure out a lot of other things as well. Now I want to really make sure that the eyes are the right size, because that will greatly impact the face. So I'm taking the length of how long her eye was, and I'm going to put that in the center, because we know that we can fit an entire eye in between our eyes. Now it might have been like 14/16 of an inch or so that I was using here, but I'm just using that to plot out the eyes. Things are seeming to fit pretty good here. And then this is also telling me that my face is still too wide. If I can't really fit 5 eyes or so across, things are just still a little wonky. But I know now that I've got my eye size just right here. I know that because I could compare with the photo that I was looking at. So now I'm going to go back in and start adjusting the face even more. Again, you don't necessarily have to get the face just right now. You can work on other facial features and then go back and adjust the face shape later. What I'm doing here right now is actually comparing how wide her face is in the picture to how wide my face is. Just measuring how many inches across from the nose line, from the mouth line, and then just making adjustments on my own drawing. So right now I'm just checking to see if her hairline is halfway between her eyeline and the top of her head, and it pretty much is. So I'm just going to mark off half. I'm not actually measuring it perfectly, I'm just eyeballing about halfway up the top of the head. So I'm marking that off. So that's where her forehead ends and her hair begins. And this is different from what we've done before, but I'm actually going to very roughly just kind of drop in where her hair is, because I think it's going to actually kind of help me get this face shape to be even better. So I'm not really worrying about the specifics of the hair right now, just kind of getting the general shape going. I'm comparing how much space I see between the ear and the eye, where the hair crosses over that space, looking at the shapes that the hair makes. You notice that the hair frames the face very nicely. Now remember that the hair comes out way above the scalp. So now I'm actually going to come in here and start to draw in the shapes of her eyes. Now again, don't let the makeup fool you. Makeup makes the eyes look way bigger than they actually are. Focus on the whites of the eyes, including the iris and the pupil as well, but think about the white part of the eyes. That's the actual opening of the eyeball. How much of that do you actually see? And then use the eye line that you drew to help you. How much of the eye is going above the eye line? How much can you see below the eye line? And you can actually just go on your photograph and draw the shape of the eye, and then compare that shape to the eye line. When I draw eyes, I actually like to work sideways because I feel like I can get the shape better for some reason. So try that out for yourself. See if that works for you. Now here I'm noticing that the bottom eyelid on her is actually pretty flat. It doesn't really round out on the bottom that much, but her top eyelids seem to be a lot more round. See that shape right there? And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to trace a shape around her eye. Now remember that your eyes are not going to be symmetrical to each other. They're not going to be perfect. So you don't want to just do the same exact thing you did on the other side but here, and try to really create that shape that's characteristic to the person that you're drawing. Okay, so now we can go in here and just get the basic shape of the iris. Now, next time that we're having a conference together, we will actually go over the details of the eye. But right now, just do your very best. Draw very, very lightly so that if you do make a mistake, you can fix it up later. But try to just get the basic shape of the iris. That's the colored part of the eye. Think about how much of the whites of the eyes that you can see. Break them down into basic shapes, and then just put them down on the paper. Okay, so for her nose, remember that the very outer cartilage of the nose usually lines up with the inner corner of the eye. If you draw a straight sheet of lines straight down, try to make it as vertical as possible. Mine might have got a little bit diagonal. Sorry for the lag in the video there. But on your drawing, really try to make sure that you get some nice vertical cheetah lines to tell where the nose is. You see on the photograph, I kind of made that left side one a little bit too diagonal. Try to get them vertical. And then go in there and start to just drop in the little indications of where the nose is. That center line, that vertical line we drew down the face, that's where that septum is going to be. And the septum is usually thicker than you might think it is. So don't make your septum too thin. Your nose is going to look a little bit strange if you do. Now pay attention to the sides of the nostrils. Are they actually on the nose line or do they come up a little bit above it? Again, I'm just drawing very, very lightly here, dropping in things where I think they go, looking at the photograph a lot. There might even be moments where I'm not even looking at my drawing. I'm looking at the photograph because that helps you focus on drawing what you're seeing instead of what you're thinking about. Now, Anne Hathaway's nose is pretty different from a lot of noses I've seen. She doesn't really have a lot of creases in the sides of her nose like many people do, so her nose may be a little bit more challenging. But hopefully you can kind of just drop in little comma shapes for those outer nostril cartilage pieces. Now the nostrils themselves, the holes in the face, are not going to be circles when you're looking straight on at somebody. They're going to be small, skinny lines. The only time your nostril will look like a circle is if you're looking up at somebody from down below. But you see how the openings of the nose here are just very thin little lines. Now your nose is not symmetrical either, so pay attention to what it's doing on both sides. Drop in a few little lines, a few little shapes. Take a moment to look at it. And what I like to do is I like to add in the little bit of the bridge of the nose. You see in between her eyes where the bridge of the nose is. I like to add that in because it actually helps me with the eyebrows later. Okay, so we're going to move on to her mouth now. Now, same thing with the nose. Where her lips part in the middle is where the mouth line begins. But if your person is smiling especially, do the corners of the mouth go up above the mouth line? That's okay if they do. The corners of the mouth do not have to be on the mouth line. The middle of the mouth does, but not the outer corners. Now remember that the outer corners of the mouth usually line up with the center of the eyelids. So try to get some vertical lines, draw on your photograph if you need to. See if it's true. For Anne Hathaway, it's pretty much true here. The outer corners of the lips meet up with those middles of the eyes. Now notice that her lips are very upturned at the edges. So really pay attention to that in your own photograph, especially if they're smiling or making any expression. Where do the outer corners of the lips meet up with? So here I'm just drawing my guidelines, and then erasing a little bit, cleaning up. And I'm going to go in here and just indicate where the lips part in the center. And then I'm actually going to go in here and start to drop in some lines where her corners of her mouth kind of turn up a little bit. You see how the outer corners of her lips go above the mouth line. They actually go up to about halfway between the mouth line and the nose line. Again, nobody who's smiling has a symmetrical mouth, so pay attention to those shapes that you're seeing. Okay, so I'm going to start working on her lips here. So I'm actually going to go onto my photograph here and do a little bit of drawing. So we all have a dip in our top lip where your cupid's bow is. I'm going to mark that off. And then notice that the sides of her top lip actually kind of flatten out a little bit because she's smiling. The outer corners are coming up into a smile. They're curling upwards, so the top of her lip is going to be actually kind of flat, save for that little area where it dips in for the cupid's bow. Again, this might be different for your person, so draw on your photograph, see what kind of shapes the lips make, and try to recreate them on your drawing. Again, you can make little adjustments
And I'm noticing that her bottom lip kind of curls downward a little bit. It's a lot more round than the top lip. So I'm just drawing myself some guidelines. Look at those shapes. Look at those shapes that you see. And try to just drop them in there. Again, draw lightly. You can always go back and touch things up a little bit. Okay, so moving on to her ears now, we know that the bottom ear lobes are usually in line with the nose line, and the top earlobes, or cartilage rather, is in line with the eye line. That is not true for her. Her top cartilage of her ears goes pretty far above her eye line, but the bottom earlobes are pretty much in line with the nose line. So I'm just going to extend up a little bit above the eye line. Now her ears are actually pretty wide. You can see a lot of detail in the ears that you maybe wouldn't be able to see in another person. So I'm just paying attention to the shape of her ear, where it gets a little bit rounder, where it gets a little bit pointier up at the top. And again, keep it really simple right here. Don't worry about the details just yet. Just try to get those shapes just right. Now this side, her hair covers a lot of her ear, but I'm going to try to just ignore it for a second. I'm going to pretend that I can see the whole ear and try to just get the shape in there. I'm going to go back in later and cover part of the ear up with her hair. But for right now, just getting that basic shape. Looking at those curves, where it straightens out, where it gets rounder. Okay, so now we're moving on to the eyebrows. So we know that eyebrows are about one eye's height above the eyes. So I'm actually going to test it out. I'm going to measure how tall her eye is, and then slide the ruler up to see if it's the same amount of space. It's about true. Her eyebrows might be a little bit higher up than one eye's height, but notice that her eyebrows also, they're very trimmed, so they kind of dip in a little bit towards the center, and then they have a nice arch. So to figure out where the ends of her eyebrows are in the center, I'm just going to draw a couple lines here and then try to get them in the same spot. This is where that bridge of the nose is really helpful. Look at how the eyebrows just naturally connect to the bridge of the nose. If you can get that bridge shape just right, you actually have pretty much found where the eyebrows start. So I'm just going to draw in a basic shape to begin the eyebrow. Try to look at those shapes to get that shape just right. Now to get the arch to look right, what I'm going to actually do is draw a little diagonal line from the tail of the eyebrow to the outer edge corner of the eye. I'm looking at those diagonals, and I'm just going to try to create another diagonal at the same angle on my drawing. And that'll pretty much tell me where the tail of her eyebrow should end. This comes with practice, so again, just remember to draw very lightly. If you're drawing somebody who has less prim and waxed eyebrows, you're probably going to be doing more of a blocky shape, but she has very nice, precise brows, so I'm trying to get that angle to look just right. Again, think of everything as a shape. Now I'm just going to come in here and erase my guidelines because for the most part, I don't need them anymore. So just doing a little bit of cleaning up. And now at this point, I'm actually going to go in here and fix up the shape of her hair. Not worrying about strands of hair or details or highlights, just fixing up the shape. I'm looking at where my hairline is, that line that we drew across the face, and noticing what parts of her hair go above that line, what parts go below that line. Overall, just trying to make the shape of it look just right, because it's important for how it frames her face. Throwing a couple little baby hairs in there if you like. Draw on your photograph, look at the shapes that they're making, and just pop them in. Again, draw lightly. Don't put too much pressure on the pencil or else erasing won't do much good for covering up areas that you press too hard on. Again, I'm looking at my photograph, looking at the lines I see. What lines are curvy? Where do I see corners? Where do I see harder edges? Draw on your photo if you need to. Once you've established that basic shape of the hair, you can actually go ahead and erase the top of your oval where the scalp is. You're not going to be able to see that anymore because the hair is covering it up. So you can just take it on out. Okay, so last thing we need to do is save her from being just a floating head. So I'm going to look at where the neck starts. She is a very feminine figure, so her neck is very thin and it's very long. So I'm going to compare where does the neck start in relation to her jawline. And before I start doing that, I'm actually going to clean up my jawline just a little bit more, make a few last little adjustments. From what I'm seeing, and I take a long time to really study the photo I'm looking at before I make a mark here. From what I'm seeing, it looks like her neck starts, I'm going to do a little bit of drawing, compare some things, draw myself some guidelines, and put her neck down right there. Pay attention to the shape the neck makes. It's not just a straight beam, and it's not just a big bulbous thing, unless you're drawing the rock. Try to get those curves to look right. And if it looks like you made something too curvy, just straighten it out a little bit. You want to try to get the neck and at least a little bit of the collarbone and the shoulders if you can. You don't want your person to just be a head. You want to get a little bit more detail going. But don't worry about little tiny details just yet. Just shapes, just contours. Now if your person's wearing clothing, it's important to remember that clothing sits on top of the skin. It's not part of the skin. So it's going to come up a little bit higher than the skin itself. It's not just going to be kind of stuck on there. Think about it as its own form. And with that, you are done with your contour lines, and you are ready to move on to the next part. Good job!